The Melting Pot. Hosted by Dominic Monkhouse.
This is Dominic Monkhouse. Today I am interviewing Henry Stewart, the author of the book The Happy Manifesto. I'm going to talk to him today about some of the things that he sees as being really important inside organisations, things that need to be done differently to create a happy workplace, to create a workplace where people are engaged and productive. Trust your people, we'll talk about pre-approval, selecting managers who are good at managing, but some of the others that I urge you to have a look at the book to understand more deeply: recruit for attitude, train for skill, openness and transparency, and get a work-life balance. But now, here's Henry.
I'm Henry Stewart. I'm Chief Happiness Officer of Happy Limited, which is a training and consultancy provider in London. And what we do is we help organisations create happy workplaces.
Thank you, Henry. Chief Happiness Officer. Why are you not the CEO?
Well, I was CEO for a long time. And then I came across Alex Kedgerolf from Copenhagen, who called himself Chief Happiness Officer. And I thought that should be the role. The role is to create a happy workplace where people feel fulfilled. So I changed my title to Chief Happiness Officer.
And did you change any of your job at the same time?
Oh, that's a good question. Not explicitly, but it changes the focus, because every time I introduce myself as Chief Happiness Officer, I have to think about, am I succeeding in creating a happy workplace? Am I creating that culture? So I think things have changed as a result of it, yes.
Okay. There's a couple of things I want to try and explore with you, if we can, today. One is that you don't have any managers at Happy. And one of the things I've been trying to do on the podcast is talk to people who think differently and act differently about business. And not having managers would be quite different.
Okay, we don't have managers. We have what we call coordinators. What you don't want is people who tell people what to do and think they're the expert. Yeah. However, most people, if you leave them completely to their own devices, feel a bit lost and a bit unsupported. So we do have people whose role is very simple, whose role is to coach. And most of our staff will meet every couple of weeks with that person, and they'll have a half-hour coaching session. They will have an annual appraisal with them. But the actual key difference isn't so much that we don't have managers, because we have a different form of that, but that we let people choose who is their coordinator. I believe very strongly that people should be able to choose their managers.
And so how does that structure fit with a typical organisational chart?
Well, if you have a very hierarchical chart where you're managed by so-and-so, is managed by so-and-so, is managed by so-and-so, then it is difficult to fit it. But actually, an awful lot of organisations don't have that kind of chart. So take, for instance, Ernst & Young. Mm-hmm. At Ernst & Young, you go and work on projects as a project manager, but you have a long-term counsellor who provides your support, who coaches you and carries out your appraisal. And there, again, you can choose who that is. And most organisations have some form of matrix or projects or things like that. If you're still stuck with that old hierarchy, then it's time to change it, because it doesn't work.
What if you want to be a coach and nobody wants you?
Then you don't get to be a coach. We would help you. If you want to be a coach, we would help develop you, help support you. But if nobody wants you, then tough. It's like at W.L. Gore. If you want to be a leader, you have to find some followers. If nobody thinks you're going to be a good coach for them, then tough. You find something else to do.
And so are some people not overwhelmed?
We do have a kind of limit, which is somewhere around 8 to 10. People can be full. But the key point here is, in most organisations, if you look around them, you will see people in leadership and management positions who simply don't know how to manage people. If you look at Gallup, they reckon 10% of the population are natural managers. Another 20% can be taught how to manage people, and you should forget the rest. Now, that may be, I don't know, 70%, it's a lot, but in most organisations, there are people there who would love to be able to give up the management people position. Let's take an example. Say you're a coder at Google, and you're a brilliant coder, and you've been there a long time, and at most organisations, be made a coding manager. Wouldn't happen at Google, partly because it's probably not your skill set, and partly because if you're a brilliant coder, then let's get you coding all the time, because that's what you're great at. We're a great believer in helping people play to their strengths. And for a lot of people, their strength is not managing people. But that shouldn't get in the way of them getting promoted, paid a lot of money, and doing a great job.
And enjoying what they do.
And enjoying what they do, absolutely. Because we believe that people should have joy at work. My colleague Kathy reckons she gets joy 95% of the work she does at Happy. And her aim is for her team to get joy in their work at least 80% of the time. And how we ensure that is by helping them to do stuff they're good at and giving them the freedom to do it well.
Fab. And there's some other things that I've stolen from you over the years, one of which is pre-approved. The best example of that is that whilst I was at Pier 1, the staff decided that my idea of windbreaks were pointless and that the company would do much better if it had its own pub in the office. And as their involvement was under sort of the Happy Manifesto principles, any decision they came up with was obviously pre-approved. Could you tell me more about how you ended up with this? Well, maybe you could just go back to the beginning and tell me a bit about the Happy Manifesto and why you thought there had to be a manifesto, and then we can jump into one or two of the specifics.
The Happy Manifesto is a book I wrote to put the argument that people work best when they feel good about themselves, and that happy workplaces are more productive. They're better for everyone. They're better for the organisations, and they're better for the people that work in them. I mean, to put it simply, what people don't like is they don't like being told what to do, micromanaged, blame cultures, right? We've all been there. We all hate it. What they do like is to be doing something they're good at, playing to their strengths, having the freedom to do it well, having managers who coach rather than tell, and no blame culture. In our view, you should celebrate mistakes, and flexible working. And create all that, and you'll create a great place to work. And specifically on pre-approval, one of the stories that really tells it is, many years ago, a trainer sent me an email saying, I love these 3 things you've done to make my life easier. And I looked at the 3 things, and the first thing I noticed was I had no idea they'd happened. Because they hadn't come across my desk for approval. But then I noticed if they had come across my desk, I'd have rejected 2 of them. Because I set up most of the ways of doing things at Happy. I use my best thinking, and I reckon my thinking's pretty good. So I'm a natural barrier to change, like nearly all managers. The moment you start improving it, start changing those proposals, it takes away the ownership. Think about times in the past when you've put your best idea up to your manager and they've improved it. It's not a great experience normally. So I realized the only way to get out of this, because inevitably it comes across my desk, I want to do that, was to make sure it didn't come across my desk. So what we do now is we approve the solution before they've thought of it. So the idea is, instead of somebody coming up with a proposal or a solution or some new way of doing something and bringing it back for approval, we approve that at the beginning. The key is you have to have clear guidelines, budget, timescale, all of these things agreed, and then you leave them to it. And wonderful results happen. The classic one was our website, which I'd been very involved in before because it's vital to Happy. So I'd always been suggesting maybe we should have this or that or do that. So the person in charge of the website never really felt in charge of the website. So we put Johnny in charge, and this time we decided we would pre-approve it. Now, that doesn't mean saying do whatever you like. Absolutely clear. It means, as I say, freedom within guidelines. So we agreed the guidelines, we agreed the metrics. It would be judged on how many people visited and how much income it generated. Johnny went on the best search engine optimization training we could find, so he had skills. And also, one of the guidelines was Johnny had to be talking to the customers, to the users, to find out what they needed from the website. We didn't need to know what they'd said, but we needed to know that dialogue was happening. So I saw the website the night before it launched, when it was too late to do anything about it. It either went up or it didn't. And it was not what I expected. That I looked into, why is that there? Why is that there? What's that about? But it was completely within the guidelines. So I had no alternative. Up it went. And when we got the metrics a couple of months later, visitors had trebled and income had doubled. even without the benefit of my expertise. And so that's what we do all the time. At the moment, for instance, we're about to change the core IT system in the company, the booking system. And I've set we've agreed some guidelines, but there's 5 people off doing that. They will make the decision. I will at most just push and check their thinking, but they will make that decision. They will implement that, and that is the absolutely core system in the company, which I will not be involved in the decision of.
Not there to improve it.
Certainly not there to improve it. Yeah.
And of course, the interesting thing about your observation on the website is that you would never have known that you were wrong.
Absolutely. I would have carried on producing an inferior website and have no idea. Well, I've just read General McChrystal's, Team of Teams, where he talks about they decided to delegate to the front line because they needed the quick response. And if they got it right 70% of the time, it was probably okay. And what they found was that they actually got it right more often than he would have, because they were close to the action, they knew what was going on, and not only were they able to respond quickly, but they made better decisions.
And it's so interesting, isn't it? Because when you talk to managers or leaders about those two things, you might not be able to persuade them that the front line would make better decisions, whereas you and I know that that's often the case, but that's often you're not going to get them to agree that their expertise is not really that relevant or that valuable. But what you often persuade them is that the speed of response is the key thing, and you can get them to agree to allow more decisions to be pushed to the front line based on speed of response and the importance that might have. I mean, in terms of fighting troops to loss, but to customers in other organisations.
Yeah, and actually, I'm not natural at this. I've quite a high opinion of myself, Dom. I think I'm ever so clever. I think I'm quite brilliant at times. So, how could Edward make decisions as well as I did, But over the years, I've come to be a little more humble because I realise they do. I'm wrong a lot of the time and they're right a lot of the time.
I was going to say there are two things that occur to me. One is that obviously it has a positive impact on the employees' self-belief because you're giving them the authority to do it. So people go, okay, they trust me. But also, is there a thing where people do better work because it's not going to be second guessed?
Absolutely. You put all your energy into making it work, not into the politics and whether so-and-so will approve it and how we have to pitch it. And so much effort in most companies goes into getting things approved and all of that internal stuff. Let me give you another example of it from a client of ours in Cheltenham, which you may have heard of, called GCHQ. And they started doing pre-approval, and they took it a step further. They need to be at the forefront of technology, right? Because they need to be at the forefront of everything going on the internet. So they managed to get £1 million budget from their bosses, and they set up a crowdfunding site where you could say, I need £5,000 for this, or £200 for that, or £10,000 for that. Now, in most organisations, once you've got all the ideas up, who would make the decisions? It would be the directors, wouldn't it? The managers would make the decisions. What they did was they split up the £1 million into 100 sets of £10,000 and gave it to the most junior people in the organisation to make the decision. People who had to have never managed a budget, never managed a person, and then you got £10,000 to spend on something innovative. Not, your own thing, something on the site. So a colleague of mine had a £10,000 idea for a new piece of technology to improve communication. In the past, it would have taken 5 levels of approval to get that agreed, and he probably wouldn't have bothered. It was too much trouble. With a new system, it got funded within a week by all these colleagues around the organisation, and he implemented within 2 weeks. And just think of that. No faff, no waste of time. You get a great idea, you can put it into practice. That's the difference if you start to trust your frontline people.
Of the other 9 points on your manifesto, which is the next, assuming that one's quite, the one we've been talking about is quite contentious, what do you think is the next most contentious one, or the one where you get the most pushback?
Okay, so what have we got? Well, number 1, trust your people. That's one that people agree with in principle, but never manage to do. So that is about the pre-approval and but crucially within guidelines. Everything, it's not about saying do whatever you like. There's making your people feel good. When I ask people if people work best when they feel good, less than 1% disagree. I often ask at an organisation, okay, how many of you is that the focus of management? We all agree that's what makes people work best. How many is it the focus of management? Normally, About 1 in 50 put their hand up. But I was on the panel with the chair of one of Britain's biggest retail organisations who put his hand straight in the air and said, yes, in my 90,000 strong company, that is the focus. Can you guess which retail company it was?
John Lewis.
Absolutely, spot on. And he explained, Charlie Mayhew, who explained how at the last board meeting they spent 20 minutes discussing the numbers and 3 hours discussing people and how to motivate them. So think, in your organisation, is there a 5-to-1 ratio? Well, that's actually more than 5-to-1. 5-to-1 ratio, 5 times as much time on people as on numbers. There should be. At John Lewis, it was set up by Sped and Lewis in the 1930s. And at the core of the Constitution is the statement that every decision must be based on how happy it makes the staff. And it's on that basis that John Lewis grew from a couple of stores to the giant that it is today. So we've got that. We've got freedom within guidelines. Celebrate mistakes. That's always one that people love. That's occasionally consensus. Yeah, do you reckon?
I suppose they don't disagree, but I think often people find it difficult to understand why there would be a benefit to that.
Right. Because my first question is, do we want mistakes? And actually, most people say, well, yeah, actually, kind of we do. Because let's say I've turned up, I've worked somewhere 3 months. I go to my probation thing and I say, I've been here 3 months and I've made no mistakes. What do you think? What would you think, Dom, in response to that?
Well, I would think you haven't been trying very hard, but then if you're an air traffic controller, maybe that's a good thing.
Well, this is interesting. Let's take aerospace and health. Right? Yeah. A friend of mine made a program on BBC Radio 4 on this last year, this very subject. And in aerospace, there is a real focus on no blame. When there's a crash, it's not about who's to blame. It's about what's wrong with the system. And as a result of that being consistent the case over decades, if you get in an airplane nowadays, the chance of crashing are 1 in 8 million. Take health, it's not the same. For all people trying to change it, and even Jeremy Hunt, who I'm not a great fan of, but on this he's good, he's trying to create a no-blame culture. But we know from all the inquiries and the things that have gone wrong in the NHS, things get covered up. And the problem happens again and again because people die in the NHS by mistake. But if you can't talk about that, if you can't talk about that without being blamed or whatever, it's going to happen again.
Well, and also the sort of rise of of litigation. Nobody then managerially or culturally saying, well, we can't admit a failure because we'll be sued. And then that goes completely against the ability to try and fix that. If that cultural issue exists, it becomes impossible. It becomes ingrained. That
misperception is wrong. We do a lot of training with doctors, and they're very clear that complaints very rarely have much to do with actual competence. They have to do with attitude. They have to do with the response. If you go and hit a brick wall and people aren't interested, then you complain. If you go and, even if something terrible's happened, and find somebody open and transparent and caring, you tend to not to complain. And that's what you want. You want openness. My family had one thing which nearly went very badly wrong. And when we went back, we just wanted them to say, sorry, we got it wrong. Yeah, we didn't want to sue them. We just wanted to know, sorry, we got it wrong. We're going to try and make sure that doesn't happen again. And that's what we all want. One more. A key one is play to your strengths. Too often you get put into a job, and whether you're good at it or not, that's your job. That's your job description. You've got to do it. What we spend a lot of time at is working out what people are good at. And not even managers deciding, but nowadays, if we got a task to delegate, we don't say so-and-so do it. We give it to the team and say, who wants to do this? Who feels it plays to their strength? Work out what you're good at and do more of it, because too often we have our strengths and our weaknesses, and then it's, you better work your weaknesses. No, you shouldn't. Forget the weaknesses. Try not to do that kind of stuff and work on your strengths. Get great at them.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I completely agree. There are many things I'm totally rubbish at, and nobody should be relying on me to do any of those. Every time there's somebody who loves to do that. I mean, the whole tenet of the Gallup strength stuff is there's somebody out there who really, really likes to do this and is equipped to do it. So you should just go find them to do that. And the whole idea of putting a team together.
I think I might have got that one from you. Yeah. I think you introduced us as Strength Finder, actually, Dom. Yeah. Many years ago.
I'm glad one's come back the other way. Henry, before I let you go on your crusade to make the world a better place one person at a time, there's one last question I'd like to ask you, which is, if you could start all over again, what's the one thing you would do differently?
Take more risks and make more mistakes.
Henry, thank you very much indeed for your time.
Thank you, Dom.
The Melting Pot was hosted by Dominic Monkhouse, and you can find out more about Dom on LinkedIn. Just search for Dominic Monkhouse or his companies, Foundry Media or Foundry 51.